Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Following her recent trip to Central America, Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen met with the U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and other congressional members in California in a move that has jeopardized cross-strait relations and heightened the tensions between China and the U.S. What are the consequences of the highly controversial meeting, and what are the prospects of cross-strait relations in light of the current tensions? To help us answer these questions, I'm joined today by Zhou, Senior Fellow of the Center for International Strategy and Security of Tsinghua University, Joanna Lei, former Taiwan legislator, and Einar Tangen, independent current affairs commentator. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the discussion. Well, Joanna, I will start with you. Despite the warnings from the Chinese mainland, Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen met with the U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and other congressional members in California. So what's the response? What's the public response in the island?
In Taiwan, the media basically portrayed an extremely positive breakthrough of a transit diplomacy. However, through past history, we understand that even though there may be some media report, some of these so-called transit diplomacy have never yielded strong, tangible, or material impacts for the long term. In fact, most of these transit diplomacy presented but photo opportunities and also opportunities and podiums for different politicians in the United States as well as in Taiwan. So the reports were extremely positive, but most people understand that there will be little or no tangible long-term effects.
But Joanna, we know that, as Tsai Ing-wen is from the Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, which is independence mandate. So whatever support she seeks from the U.S. or from other parts of the world is really for Taiwan independence, which is the bottom line for the mainland, and that will be, a dangerous point. So, do people really think that's, as you said, worthwhile in terms of the security, for example, long-term stability of a cross-strait relationship or the island?
In the past, when Li Denghui, Chen Shui-bian both attempted so-called transit diplomacy, there were little reactions from the mainland side. So this time may be really different because Pelosi's visit have shown Taiwan that when mainland China decided to exercise its military might, there will be extremely dire and serious consequences. So many people are awaiting. Tsai Ing-wen will be coming back tomorrow. We're looking at what kind of reactions there might be. Last time we lost the median line of Taiwan Straits. Right now, mainland China's military vessels or aircrafts pass through the median line on a routine basis. So this time, what else may be lost? So we are waiting and, in a sense, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, Zhou, of course, as Joanna pointed out, there were previous stopovers by leaders from Taiwan, Li Denghui and Chen Shui-bian. I mean, what is different in terms of these recent stopovers by Tsai Ing-wen?
Well, I think the visit is very much similar, but the background has totally changed. It is actually changed from both the United States and mainland China. On the United States, it's how the U.S. actually is becoming more frustrated with this kind of balance across the strait being broken. So actually, the United States have been debating academically whether they should have a shift from the so-called strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity, but still the government maintains that they would still keep a so-called strategic ambiguity policy. But this policy has been seen violated by its American president time again. And he talked about 4 times defending Taiwan. And if these first 2 might be gaffes, I don't believe the last 2 might be gaffes. A man cannot gaffe, 4 times on the same thing.
Right.
That would be impossible, right? And then there is a growing of strength of mainland. In the past, we protested as we are doing now, but the fundamental difference now is that we are growing stronger. And if we are getting stronger and we are not so sure about what the American attitude has become or what the DPP party is going to do, then definitely our response would be stronger.
You mentioned about strategic ambiguity and strategic clarity. Those in a sense academic terms. Please explain to us, for our viewers.
Well, Americans just maintain that the people across the strait is people of one China, but they have been deliberately ambiguous about whether they would come to military defense of Taiwan should mainland China launch a military attack. So, but in the past, if they keep it ambiguous, that means actually they have more confidence in their own capabilities because they won't let you know what they are going to do. So that means they're confident about themselves. But now, seeing mainland China becoming stronger and stronger militarily, so they are afraid that mainland China may just change its policy of using non-peaceful means. So they just want to give you a warning to make it clear that if you attack Taiwan, then I definitely would come to Taiwan's defense. But such a kind of clarity has its own disadvantages because if they say that, that would just prove to mainland China that the United States indeed is masterminding Taiwan separation from mainland China. So some American scholars worry that this kind of clarity would actually invite a preemptive strike from mainland first. So having debated in this way, I believe American government's position has to come back to the old one, but there is a fundamental change in the substance.
We also have Einar Tangen on the phone. So Einar, McCarthy talked about visiting Taiwan. Now he changed to basically the new situation of meeting the leader from Taiwan inside the U.S. So what's his purpose of meeting Tsai Ing-wen?
Well, he's a populist. This is a person who has flip-flopped on Donald Trump. First, he was excoriating Donald Trump for his role in the January 6th, and then all of a sudden he's now the most heroic person that he's ever known. He also, his lust for power is such that he suffered the humiliation of having 15 votes, a historic high, before he was actually made Speaker of the House. And in order to do that, he had to make a lot of, compromises, beyond compromises, bringing into the fold the very people who were trying to hold him back from power, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So this is an optics for him. I agree with Joanna. This is just an opportunity to bring somebody big near his constituency. He is from California. He's a representative from there in Bakersfield. This is an opportunity for him to, look big and talk big. But, the end goal here is the same as before, and that is that they want to use the China threat card to push Tsai Ing-wen back into the presidency in 2024. So you can expect this to heat up as they try to do this. They saw what happened in the election before with Hong Kong that put a scare into the electorate. Tsai Ing-wen just recently, they once again lost the midterms in a humiliating way, and she's resigned from the party chair. So the U.S. wants to keep her in power. It's the game they want to play with China to try to keep it off balance. But it's in danger, as Zhou said, of actually having some sort of confrontation simply because things become unpredictable.
And, of course, the McCarthy talked about arms deliveries to Taiwan, more arms sales to Taiwan. Do you think that will change the balance of power across the strait?
No, it doesn't change. But I mean, at least he's consistent. Every time there's a gun death, he says that the problem is there aren't enough guns. When it comes to Ukraine, he thinks that peace will be, achieved by more bombs and death. And basically, he's preaching the same thing. I think people should be aware that, his idea, and I think Taiwan should be paying attention, is that arming Taiwan to the teeth will somehow make it safer, when in fact quite the opposite. Once there's this kind of armed camp there, full of military equipment, as I said, it increases the uncertainty that Colonel Zhou was talking about, and then you have a situation where strategic ambiguity goes away, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a terrible World War I situation. No one intends to start a war, but you spark one by your actions.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, what's the response, from the island, from the people in terms of more arms purchase from Washington?
There are quite a few new arms procurement deals passed recently, and the U.S. Congress as well as politicians have promised to give Taiwan more arms. But if you listen carefully, this time they're not only talking about giving Taiwan more arms, but also promise timely delivery, because the painful experience of Taiwan was, even though we have paid in full, some of the arms articles never reached Taiwan. In addition to that, right now they are not giving us any kind of promises in terms of full defense capabilities. They are giving us arms very similar to those used by the civilians in Ukraine, making us a porcupine island, and that is not the selection or not the choice of the people in Taiwan. We were never planning to make ourselves as porcupine. As you know, the porcupine actually has no possibility of winning. And right now, all the discussions about asymmetrical warfare only promise to last a potential military confrontation for a couple of days. And the ultimate goal is for U.S. and Japan to come in Taiwan's aid. And that stern promise, quote unquote, is no longer promised or believed by most of the people in Taiwan. Because if you look at mainland China's military exercises around Taiwan, U.S. and Japan actually always decided to steer away from the potential conflict zone. They never came into the AA and AD zones. So therefore, there are more and more discussions about if and when Taiwan are under any kind of military confrontation, will the United States and Japan really come? If we bet everything on their coming at Taiwan's aid, will we be fooling ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Zhou, you mentioned about the change of a balance of power, let's say, across the strait. Of course, given the size of the market, the size of the economy, size of the population, and of course, technology progress on the mainland. Of course, the mainland is, let's say, has the upper hand. But beyond the condemnation from the Chinese departments, full of them, about the stopover. Do you think there will be any, show of strength or the sign of to show the determination from the Chinese mainland that if you follow the U.S. logic, you can only achieve peace through strength?
Well, I think there is no doubt whatsoever about determination of the Chinese people, to have this country reunified. The only thing is how we might get it reunified, whether through peaceful means or through non-peaceful means. So that is the only difference. As you have pointed out, that militarily, of course, mainland China is much, much more stronger than Taiwan's military. We never actually think too much about the strength of Taiwan's military. We always take into account Americans' assured interference and the assured participation of Japanese, because the Japanese have to provide logistic support, to say the least, according to bilateral treaties. So that is why this picture is getting more and more complicated. But having said all that, I honestly believe that it is in the interest of the people across the strait to have peaceful reunification. And the most important thing is, to avoid a war, you have to let mainland China to believe that we can have peaceful reunification. That is most important. Let mainland China to believe there is a peace to be maintained in the strait, then the peace can be maintained. People talk about sometimes how different we are and how Taiwanese people do not like our social system, so on and so forth. There might be a truth, grain of truth in it, but look at the fact. Some people say that there are about 2 million Taiwanese people living in mainland. So if it is 2 million, then that is almost 10% Taiwanese. So this kind of integration has already started. These 2 million people are not poor people. They are at least middle-class people. So that means if they can live in mainland in a very comfortable way, then with this kind of reunification, I'm sure mainland will give much more preferential treatment to Taiwanese to make their life equally comfortable. So I believe eventually this kind of peaceful reunification is probably also desirable in the long term for the Taiwanese.
Joanna, what's your response? If you want to, maintain peace, and you have to probably let Beijing believe there's peace to maintain. Status quo is cherishable, valuable to maintain instead of having any military conflicts over there. Do you think people in Taiwan understand that point or get that point?
Well, it's not clear. I mean, the whole issue has been.
Sorry,
well, people
Joanna.
do understand that, and also.
Yeah, I think the issue has been.
I do believe that people understand it, and also things that. Should I start? I think this has already been discussed and is every day in the public mindset, because the visit of Ma Ying-jeou to mainland China coincided with Tsai Ing-wen's transit visit in the United States, presenting a very stern contrast of the two different alternatives. And these alternatives will be determined by people come January 13th, when they make the next election. And I do believe that most people cherish peace more than anything else. So whatever his or her ideology may be, peace will be the #1 concern for people living in Taiwan. And I also do agree that there are a lot of traveling and career development across Taiwan Straits. 7 million people from Taiwan holding a mainland travel card. Every year, 1.7 million to 2 million people traveled back and forth from Taiwan to China. So there's no reason why we cannot resolve our differences. In fact, from 2005 to 2016, we started from non-official contact to having 11 official visits, signing 21 official agreements. We are fully capable of resolving our differences without foreign intervention, especially from the United States.
Joanna, you mentioned about Ma Ying-jeou's recent trip to the mainland. That's a landmark visit, since he is the first former leader of the island to visit the mainland. So how important is it, and what's his message there? You mentioned about different alternative here for Taiwan people.
It is extremely important because before Tsai Ing-wen's visit to the Central America, it's touted as a way to not only visit relationship and also to cement further relationship with the United States, to show stern support of the United States. But you can see that her arrangements were overturned, and in fact, U.S. did do an about-face to her, especially on the New York leg of the visit. On the other hand, when Ma Ying-jeou went to China with very little forecast of what may happen, he's received with warmth, and his exchanges with youngsters talked about our collective future. And it is that collective future will persuade both people in Taiwan and elsewhere to choose between peace and war, and people will choose peace, and also to join an extremely exciting future of the rising China. So I think Ma Ying-jeou's visit is extremely important and timely at this point.
Einar Tangen in Beijing, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I want to pick up on 2 points. One, first off, as Joanna said, China is rising, and there's no question that it will be the largest economy in the world at some point. It has these trade groups, RCEP, et cetera, and these are very attractive to Taiwan, obviously. As a trade nation, a good percentage of the GDP is dependent on trade, in fact, most of it. But it's timing. And in terms of timing, and what I'm talking about here is Washington. Washington is afraid that if they don't keep Taiwan at a kind of a low boil, that at some instigate something that at some point in the future, Taiwan will peacefully reunite with the mainland simply because of the economics. Already, 40% of Taiwan's economy is linked to China, directly and indirectly. As Colonel Bo said, there's so many people working from Taiwan in China. Before 2019, it was almost 10% of the working population was in mainland. So at this time, really the U.S. is concerned that they lose this asset, and with it, this opportunity to use it as a PR pawn. And what I mean by that is, in the U.S., we really do not care about our allies in Europe. We don't care about our neighbors in either Mexico or Canada. We've treated them very badly. You can only imagine what the real feeling that people in Washington have towards Asians far, far away, in a place most of them couldn't point to on a map unless it was labeled. So this myth that some Taiwanese have that the U.S. is truly concerned about Taiwan, other than for chips and trying to hollow out its economy by getting those chip-making facilities in the U.S., I think they'd be mightily mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, if you look closely at the Chinese policy on Taiwan, from different important meetings in Beijing or documents, basically the Chinese side, the policy on Taiwan for peaceful reunification remains unchanged with the different leadership here, Xi Jinping and previously Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, for example, it remains the same. But for the U.S., they are more or less changing its policy and developing official relationship in violation of their own one China policy. And there are talks of refusing to accept even a peaceful reunification across the strait. Is that official policy of the U.S. or becoming more and more probably picking up of support in Washington?
Well, I mean, there is this cornerstone belief that the U.S. is, American exceptionalism, that America must lead the world into, one future, which is liberal democratic capitalism. It hasn't worked so far. I don't think it will. It's in contrast to what Xi Jinping and China are putting forward, that, what you need are principles of development, security, and respect for civilization so that each country can go its own way. It's kind of irony that basically China is proposing a Westphalian system. That was the treaty that ended the war between Catholics and Protestants under the understanding that you do what you do in your country and I'll do the same in mine, but we can trade and be peaceful. So that is what China is proposing. And as I said, there's this time element in Washington. They really believe this is their last opportunity to contain China and to use to use places like Taiwan as a thorn in the side of Beijing to prevent it from realizing its full economic potential. Remember, every dollar that goes into a bomb or a soldier is not going into economic development, and that's where people in Washington are really cheering it on. In terms of ultimately, would they agree to a peaceful reunification? Well, they can't really stop it, but they would do everything in their power with the kind of disinformation machine to stop it. Obviously, there are a lot of groups in there who are parade as NGOs who are actually looking for regime change. They look for that in China, and they certainly would try the same thing in Taiwan. In fact, that's what we're witnessing here, interference, trying to whip up the anti-China card in order to influence the election coming up in January.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe Boy, of course, we talk about the peace. We know peace is important. Peace is the priority. But then, in some parts of the world, for example, the Ukraine crisis, there are conflicts over there. And the U.S. has increasingly talking about or comparing, there's a different narrative. They say, oh, today is Ukraine, tomorrow is Taiwan. And McCarthy also compared, Taiwan to Ukraine. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that is a very convenient way of trying to draw people's attention to Taiwan issue without wasting a bullet. Because let me tell you why I think it is a strategy. After the breakout of the war in Ukraine, China's defense budget is still more or less the same. And this year, it is still more or less the same. It is still below 2%. That means in spite of the war in Ukraine, or in spite of people talking about the coronation of Ukraine and Taiwan, mainland China is very much calm. And this kind of calmness represents a kind of confidence about what? About itself, about the environment, and about peace. Normally, defense budget would not lie. It tells best what you think about your environment, right? If you feel, uneasy or feel afraid, you just increase your budget, just like during the Cold War. Britain's defense budget could be 6%. But I remember when I was on a trip to UK, people told me it's very difficult, for people to think why we have to spend more in defense rather than in education or healthcare. That was about 10 years ago when Britain's, budget didn't reach 2% of GDP, which is a NATO standard. So I think this, or whatever people talk about, this kind of a defense budget would not lie, right? And this should be really assurance, to people about China's peaceful intention. Yes, we are speeding up our military development. We want to make our military one of the strongest in the world, but we do not want to use it, unless and until the worst scenario came. And the worst scenarios were clearly written in China's anti-secession law. This is the last one being that mainland China feel that the prospect of peaceful reunification is exhausted for good. Then mainland China will have to use non-peaceful means. So this is what I said in the beginning. To let mainland China believe that there is still peace to be maintained in the Taiwan Strait is paramount, is most important, is crucial.
Well, Joanna from Taiwan, what's the response, in all the belief or the understanding of the people in Taiwan about the Ukraine situation, in particular, comparing Taiwan to Ukraine?
I think this is the most unconscionable attempt by the United States, because Taiwan and mainland China, even though with our differences, the last time a bombshell dropped in Jinmen was 1958, October 5th. In the ensuing years, there were no military conflicts, no bombs dropped on Taiwan. So all of a sudden, in 2022, people talked about a hot war across Taiwan Straits, comparing Taiwan to Ukraine. There is no reason why this narrative should surface, with the exception of the United States' grand strategy of having a potential cue ball, as if you were playing pool, using Taiwan as a cue ball to irk China. So I think there is a very strong understanding and general mindset that we have to work really, really hard within Taiwan so that the foreign forces, especially from the United States and Japan, will not push us into a war, whether advertently or inadvertently.
Well, with that, we have come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qingduo. See you next time.